Hey, everybody, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight. As always, on Think, Engage, Thrive, we try and bring you great entrepreneurs, tell great stories so you can hear the good, the bad, and the funny stories about starting businesses because not everybody not everybody does it easily. There's a lot of work that goes into it and a lot of a lot of sweat equity and a lot of bootstrapping. So tonight, uh, carrying on with our sort of AI focus over the last few weeks, we've heard from a lot of entrepreneurs about different AI products they're building and their take on AI. Because I know everybody is listening to these stories about how AI is going to take over the world and it's going to cost jobs and things like that. So what we're trying to do is bring reality to it, what people are doing with AI, how they're using it, what problems they're solving with it. And the reality is, I don't see jobs going away. I mean, like I said before, we use it in my agency and have for years. It's more of I think, a tool and a job enhancer than it is a replacement for jobs. So, but tonight we're talking to Damasco. And a fellow New Yorker. He's from Queens. I'm from the Bronx. We won't hold the Queens thing against him. He's probably a Mets fan. I'm a Yankees fan, but we won't talk about that. It's like politics. You don't want to get into sports, but he's an award-winning product builder, good background, college. He's going to tell some stories about his college roommate and he. But like a lot of us, he started out as an Amazon seller, and I think that's always a good, almost a training ground, right? For in this day and age for being an entrepreneur. So we're going to bring him in. He's done a lot of great things. Most recently, he's with Asentio or Asentio, and it's an AI product. But the unique part is it's based in Sweden, so that comes with complexities because there's three initial partners, and they're all in different parts of the country. He's in New York, one guy's in Sweden, one guy is in, I believe he said the Netherlands, and so there's complexities to that, and so he's going to get into that a little bit. So let's bring him in and let's hear what he's got to say. Zach, how you doing? How's everything?
Doing good, Phil. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, my pleasure. You had a rough.
I do have to say something though. I am from Queens, but I'm a Yankee fan. Joey Posada's my favorite player, so you don't got to worry. No beef here. No beef.
I was just busting chops. Everybody that I ever grew up around that was from Queens was a Mets fan and a Jets fan. And on my side, we were always Yankees and Giants fans. But anyway, so it's always funny to me. I always say that people from Queens are, but yeah. So you had a rough flight back. You've been in the air for days trying to fly back from Sweden. But tell us a bit about your background, how you got started, why you decided to become an entrepreneur. That's always an interesting intro. You can talk about college and some of the things you've done early on. So,
yeah, sure thing. I mean, so for me, for those who know me, I'm Zach. I'm a co-founder of Asentio. We make advanced AI algorithms that are very efficient at understanding what people are saying, what they're talking about, and the bias within what they're talking about. I'll explain that in a little bit more detail later. But as for my entrepreneurial background, I think I was just born into the kind of entrepreneurial mindset. My grandfather started a business. My entire family works in the business, So my father, for example, from the time I can remember, he was always building up one part of that business. And, when you're an entrepreneur, it's nonstop. So it wasn't like a 9 to 5 where you'd come home, then we have dinner. We'd have dinner and discuss, trade agreements he was negotiating with Puerto Rican distributors, at the age of 6. So, that type of upbringing definitely helps get you in the mindset early on.
What kind of business was that?
It was international beauty supply manufacturing distribution.
Ah, nice.
So it started in Italy, came over here. And I think my earliest entrepreneurial endeavor was when I was in first and second grade. At the end of the day, you had to put your chair up.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of kids that kept forgetting, so they'd get X mark stickers and all that stuff. So I said, hey, give me a dime and I'll put your chair up. And by the end of a couple of weeks, I was putting the chair up for like 10, 15 kids in the class. And, I was coming out with enough to go to the school store every day and get some Cheez-Its. So I was a very happy boy. I was a very, very happy boy. But then as I grew older, definitely got into, a bit more of, a bit more. I'm a huge sports card memorabilia collector. So growing up, I was flipping baseball cards a lot. That was kind of a big thing. I collect them mostly, but every now and then, you gotta buy and sell a little bit. So was always negotiating, trading, selling, from the age of like 12 at that point.
Yeah.
And then, I got to college and I studied information systems. But I got into information systems because I was really a finance major, and I went to a career fair my freshman year. And I'm sorry to all the finance people out there, but they were not the nicest people, we'll say. And I just didn't have a great connection with a lot of the people I was meeting. But at the same time, it was a CIS accounting and finance career fair. So there was a lot of information systems and technology companies there. So I ended up talking to a few of the recruiters at the technology companies, and we really vibed, really hit it off. I felt just personally, I related to a lot of the people there. So I audited a Python class, switched my major the next week, and never looked back. So that's kind of how I got into tech, and very happy I made that switch.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have a question?
No, I was going to say, so you switched to information systems, and then you took a Python class, so you started getting into, I guess, the development side of it as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then you stayed on and you got your master's, right?
Yep. So I was part of a program. So I did my undergrad in information systems, then I got an MBA as well. So it was a business program. So computer information systems at the university I studied at, Quinnipiac, is part of the business school. So a lot of the stuff, while it's not, some information systems classes are pretty much a computer science class, but on the other end, you are also learning things like, enterprise architecture and, database management systems. So at that point, it's a bit more holistic than computer science, which teaches you, computational thinking. This is more so, how do systems work in a business setting and how can you apply them? So I found it much more interesting than general computer science. That's why I went with it.
Yeah, that's great. And so how did you go from that to, because I saw in your background that you were doing Amazon selling?
Yeah. So the Amazon selling actually came from my brothers and I. We all during COVID. This is actually a little bit before COVID. My apologies. We had some ideas. We have a Dungeons and Dragons game that we were playing for a while, and my middle brother goes, there's these miniatures, and there's not a lot out here for like the characters I want and all that stuff. And, he was really into it too. So he had a bunch of other friends that were also playing, and he noticed that they weren't having those characters either. So we did some research, looked in and realized a ton of people were looking for those characters, but they weren't being sold. So a lot of times when we think Amazon sellers, these are people that are just kind of buying a product and then reselling it. We actually went the full manufacturing route. We designed, prototyped, tested, and then completely shipped out an entirely new product line. And luckily we had that kind of international manufacturing background and distribution background. So we kind of understood the complexities we were stepping into. So that helped a lot. But it was a great success. I mean, within a few months, we were an Amazon's choice product. We were doing 5 figures in revenue within a few months, and we were on track to actually hit closer to $250,000. However, that is when COVID hit, and as we all remember, shipping times, delays, manufacturing pretty much quintupled, and also cost quadrupled. So it was a big gut punch to kind of lose that product, unfortunately, just to the margins and the market. But it was a huge learning experience because I never considered the fact that building in China had such risk until I actually did. And then, these kind of unexpected catastrophes happen. And then, you just kind of have to deal with it. But it was a really, really great experience.
I think my personal preference, I've been selling on Amazon and helping people sell on Amazon since 2006. And I'm more of a brand builder. I don't believe in reselling. I'm not, it's too much. I I've seen too many of the big guys. There are some really big resellers, and they're
Yeah.
tied to distributors. A couple of them are in New York, and I've seen those guys do 10, 20, $30 million a year in sales, but generate very, very little profit. The reason is because you're really playing online arbitrage with those products. You're trying to squeeze
Exactly.
pennies here and there, and that's just not a good model for me. And so I always built brands on Amazon, whether it's
Mhm.
skincare, beauty products. We built a brand with a woman named Carol Alt. We were in the shaving business, um, and but we also, part of our business is helping brands sell today on Amazon, using it, as part of the e-commerce ecosystem. Not to be all end all. Not We don't want to say, okay, 90% of your sales are going to come from Amazon. That's dangerous. But the thing about COVID was, it wasn't just about the importation and the supply chain and all that. It was also Amazon throttled out
Yeah.
anything that wasn't essential.
Yeah.
So we had companies that we were working with that sold auto parts for example, that couldn't sell because the Amazon wasn't. They were prioritizing health,
Mhm.
baby, health and personal care, baby, things, cough and cold, things like that, drug, and everything else sort of fell by the wayside. And we just watched companies, almost fall apart. And the other piece was, even big companies. One of our largest customers is one of the largest razor manufacturers in the world, and they couldn't get steel to make razor blades.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what COVID did, but I think it's a learning experience for the future, because you have to prepare. Nobody There would have been no way for us to prepare for that ahead of time, because we've never been through anything like that before, but we have now. And so there are things that you can do to prepare yourself. But anyway, we got a little sidetracked just on that thing, but
That was a fun tangent, at least,
yeah,
though.
I think it's interesting from a business perspective how to,
Mhm.
look at things,
Yeah.
moving forward.
I really like the idea how you're saying like the brand part, because a cool thing with a brand, and this goes for anything, not just Amazon products, is you tend to build it around what you believe in, what's kind of core to you as well. And when you're reselling something that someone else is making, you don't necessarily have as much of a connection to it. But when you're the one building it, the product, the brand, everything around it, that's when you can actually encapsulate yourself into it. And that goes for software too. That's what we did with Asentio. And yeah.
Yeah, people connect with brands. They don't connect with products. But the bigger thing is that brands sell for a multiple of sales,
Mhm.
whereas sellers or product sellers sell for a multiple of profit. So
Yeah.
you'd rather be selling for a multiple of sales than a
Mhm.
multiple of profit. So anyway, we got a little sidetracked.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So you went from selling on Amazon,
Mhm.
and you then got into more tech.
Yeah, so the Amazon stuff happened around the same time I was getting into tech heavily. So when I was in college, my first internship within tech was actually IT audit at KPMG. And it's because I was still really heavy on the business side. So I was like, oh, let me check out, KPMG, the company everyone knows, Big Four. And I'll be honest, it was kind of miserable. I didn't like it. It wasn't that the work was hard or that the environment was hard. They were really nice people. I liked the people I was working with, but I didn't resonate with what I was doing. And at that point, I was like, you know what? Why don't I just try to go all in on tech? Let me just see what's like the most ridiculous thing I can do. And I got accepted to another IT internship at Cigna, and for there we got to kind of choose our like focus area. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go within cybersecurity, and then I did threat intelligence. So it's like, what is kind of the craziest thing I could do? Um, and that's kind of how I got my start in cybersecurity. I did that and fell in love with it.
Yeah.
That's what I ended up coming up full time, and then from there, I graduated into progressively more roles. From threat intelligence, I went to data loss prevention, and then from data loss prevention, I had the opportunity to work internationally for Cigna. And that's where I got into solutions architecture on their global innovations team, kind of within their international markets specifically. So I got to get the international experience. Plus, I got to get the experience working on a truly like far-reaching product launches and organizational shifts. So
Yeah.
that was super exciting. A couple of projects there. I mean, we're talking about, integrating like an AI solution across 7 countries in Europe and helping to decouple a data center and move it from one country to another. So really interesting, cool, incredibly difficult, but
Yeah. Yeah.
exciting projects.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a few other things they did with them too. Got the chance to do some recruiting. At one point, I led the non-target recruitment pool for their one of their technology departments called TechTP. And from there, I mean, we got was leading a team of like 20 people for about 12 weeks, and we hired about 40 engineers as a result of that. Interns and full-time people. So to kind of get that experience just a few years into working is rare. And I'm very grateful that the company itself kind of let us work in that position. I think it's a lot of people don't realize is, you do have to get lucky a bit when you're first getting into like these things. I was lucky in the fact that the company I worked for, Cigna in this case, they treat us well. They gave us a lot of responsibility and they kind of encouraged us to go forward. So while I may not work for them anymore, no ill will towards them, I got to say.
No, that's good. Every experience molds you and sort of helps you build into who you are and what you're trying to be. So I've told stories before about some of the big companies I worked for, and I know I wasn't cut out for it, but I learned something from it. I pulled something out of it, and nothing was wasted. But I knew that wasn't a path I could or should take because it's just not, you know, it's just not something that I can do, So
Yeah,
anyway,
you have to feel it.
so now you're you're moving on, and let's get to Ascent IO because that seems to be an interesting product,
Mhm.
especially to somebody like me who's in e-commerce, and you're always trying to dissect. People leave reviews, people leave comments, whether it's on social or whether it's on Amazon or whether it's on your website or wherever you sell. And
Mhm.
you're always trying to decipher, but it's very difficult, especially if you're a brand and you have, say, 10, 15 SKUs and you're selling, it's very difficult to go back and look at all those reviews. There's no good system to
Yeah.
really go back and do it. So I'm not familiar with Ascent, but I've read a little bit about it. So why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown, what it is, what's the problem it's trying to solve?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll talk a bit more generally about the algorithms and then specifically how it works within kind of the review setting. But what we done is we built these highly efficient and scalable AI systems that are good at understanding text. And what we mean by that is what are people saying and what position are they taking within that text. So way we started actually was it was called Rounded News, and we were doing it as a news bias detection system. And we could analyze news articles, figure out what was being discussed in that article,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
what bias the person reporting on that article had towards the topic. So, for example, we did a big collaboration with the research group on COVID reporting across the pandemic. We were able to say, okay, what were they talking about within COVID? And what position were they taking within that article? Were they in favor of these regulations that were coming out? Were they against kind of the positions being taken by politicians? So we were kind of able to extract that insights. And a big thing was we were doing this with kind of deep learning algorithms, not large language models. And when we think about AI now, a lot of us think ChatGPT, Claude, or all these other AI systems, Google Bard, but or Gemini now, as it's called. But the thing is, those systems are very inefficient at certain tasks. It takes a lot of technical resources to run a large language model, especially for a very complex tasks like semantic understanding, which is what we were doing here. So we kind of took a blended approach, kind of using deep learning algorithms, new methods, and very efficient processes in order to analyze text and then provide that insight. And as a result, when we did our initial benchmarking, we were about 400 times faster than GPT-4, and we were actually surpassing it in accuracy across certain domains.
Wow.
And we're talking about, we're looking at technical efficiency. It's hard to specify how much that would be because we don't know the systems that were specifically used to train ChatGPT or GPT-4, but you can estimate it to be in the tune of, 1,000 times more power efficient. And that's kind of how we got into the sustainable AI space too, because we realized this isn't just process-wise optimal, but for the environment, for the planet, it's optimal because there's so much energy being wasted for problems that can be solved without these very energy-intensive solutions.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. People don't realize that. I read an article. I can't remember in what what publication it was in, but they were talking about the energy used. Well, first they were talking about the energy used to mine Bitcoin, but then it became the energy used to run some of these AI models to get, to do what we wanted to do and the speed. And you were talking about before your partner in Sweden and his efficiency of building the initial model and the reason why. And I think you should go into that because that's a good bootstrapping story.
Yeah. So we were talking about bootstrapping. These algorithms were being developed as part of research that my co-founder Renee was conducting. And at the time, it wasn't for a startup; it was for research. And he didn't have a lot of resources. He had a relatively old gaming system with commercial hardware on it. We're talking about a 6-year outdated GPU, 32 gigs of RAM. Of DDR4 for those who understand the specifics. We're talking about a couple generations old.
Yeah.
And what he had to do was he had to create these highly optimal algorithms because he couldn't run the system otherwise. He couldn't afford cloud computing. He couldn't afford upgrading the system. So unintentionally, he developed the system in a way that made it very, very energy and compute efficient.
Yeah.
And as a result, that became our competitive advantage. Which is amazing. This kind of serendipity that kind of led us to connect and then also reach our competitive advantage there.
That's a great.
Very proud of how he came to that.
It's a great story. It's a great way of doing things. Necessity sort of bears your outcome. You don't have the tools, but you're still going to head forward. You're still going to move forward. How do you get there? And you make the tools work, and you figure out how to make it work. And that's a great story. So
and to be fair though, we actually did a lot of bootstrapping even outside of that. So once we started the actual company, we joined a few accelerators and really pre-incubators. So in Sweden, there was a lot of them as part of the universities, the systems there. So we were able to join them, and they gave us a ton of resources, both in mentorship, legal help, interns, things like that. But also we're able to join things like AWS's startup program, where they gave us over $10,000 in compute credit completely free.
Oh, is that right?
And if you're out there and you're thinking about starting a business, you don't need as much capital to start as you think, especially if it's a technology based business, because there are programs out there specifically for startups. I mean, Monday.com will give you a discount on project management software. Stripe will give you $60,000 in credits for processing payments. So no matter what you're doing, you can probably find a program out there that will save you a lot of money when you're getting started.
Yeah, I don't think the problem, like what I see with tech startups and tech tech entrepreneurs, is the problem isn't so much getting started or building the prototype or building the model. It's and we actually talked about this last week with another guy who built a product for engagement, but it's always the marketing, because everybody always forgets about the marketing, and they think, okay, well, I built this great product and I'm going to put it out on this website and I'm going to do these things and people are just going to gravitate towards it. And that's just not what happens. And I coach people all the time, young entrepreneurs, and I say, you have to go out there and you got to find somebody to buy your product. because if you don't find somebody who buy your product and then buy it again, you don't really have a product.
No, not at all. And there is the fact that a lot of engineers, they don't tend to want to be public facing. They want to just build. So even just something like going to a networking event or going and doing their pitch live in front of people, we pivoted from that initial news bias to what Asentio is now as a result of pitching and getting feedback. And the feedback wasn't, hey, you should do this. The feedback was, hey, I have this business and I think I could use you. Can we talk? And that kept happening. And then we realized, oh my God, this specific part of what we're saying is resonating with people. Let's make this shift because people are now coming to us. That's kind of like that product market fit talk we talk about. You can't force product market fit. It just has to happen.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, people come up with ideas and they think, well, I have a friend actually, they're in the AR VR world, and they started out in the gaming world, and they thought that they were going to spin off and build their own game. And they were out there trying to pitch this game for years and couldn't get funding for it. And they needed funding. But in the meantime, they had this skill set for doing augmented reality and virtual reality. And so they needed to pay the bills. So they started doing projects for people. And then they created this holographic product, which now they have, I think, all the MLB, NHL, and NFL teams that they're doing work for. And it wasn't their start. It was, they did it for Under Armour first, and Stephen Curry and his shoe through Under Armour. And it was this, you scan the shoe with your phone, and this thing pops up, and Stephen Curry tells you something, and it was really cool. And that became one of the NFL teams came to them, and then another NFL team. And then the next thing you know, I mean, they've done things for like Mattel, and they've done things for, a lot of the comic brands and things like that. It's amazing because that's not how they started, and that wasn't what the path that they originally were heading down. But you have to pay the bills. And like you said, sometimes the market will tell you what it needs from your skill set.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think every I personally don't know a single startup that I've worked with or been near that hasn't at least shifted a little bit from what their initial idea was.
Oh, the pivot is essential. Everybody's got to be willing and ready to pivot, because I've never seen a business plan that somebody wrote and then a year later it was the business plan. It never works that way. Everybody has to pivot. One of the first guests we had on here was a guy who, I just adore, a young guy, and he and his partner started out with an app for doing for like deals, restaurants and bars and things like that, and which is always a very difficult thing, because it's just like any fragmented business like that. You can't. It always comes down to managing the inventory, and the inventory in that case is the daily sales, the daily deals, right? And so, and trying to spin that out, trying to scale that business, it's almost impossible, because as you go city to city, how are you going to get the inventory built? Anyway, long story short, they tried, and I mean, these guys were dedicated, man. They were focused on this business. They were driving Ubers at night to pay their bills, and they were dedicated. But after about 3 years or 4 years, they just couldn't. They could see that it wasn't working. But over that 3 or 4 years, they had built up this really fundamental knowledge about apps and app building and app marketing, and they turned that into a business, and it became, so they pivoted totally away from that, and now they have the very successful business where they're building apps, managing apps, teaching people how to market the apps, and they do a great job. But their focus is more on lifestyle. They don't want to be they don't care. They're not trying to build a $1 billion business. They're just focused on making money, paying their bills, and living however they want to live. One guy likes to travel, so he's always traveling with his wife. And so anyway, they built a lifestyle business and they're quite successful at it. But that's that's a great example of the pivot.
Absolutely. I kind of like that idea you poke there, where it's like, they're not trying to be this $1 billion startup. I feel like a lot of people when they're trying to get into business, they have this idea, they're like, oh, I need to raise money. I need to go through all these rounds, build this thing. It's like, you can just have a nice consulting business or a nice little business that makes you good amount of money. Let's upkeep your lifestyle. I mean, what was it? There was we call him family friend Paisan, you know what I mean? And they make almost $500,000 a year just in a blue collar profession, HVAC. So, they did that. They just got into it as like a side gig in college. And then, now they just have a business,
Yeah.
And they're not trying to make it $1 billion business, but it's worth a good amount.
I think that, and again, this is another subject we talk a lot about on here. I think people go out and entrepreneurs go out looking for money because they think raising capital from a VC or private equity is a badge of honor. They can say, oh, it's VC backed, it's venture backed, or it's this and that. But the reality is you don't, until you're done, you don't realize what you gave away. Whereas if you just hung in there for a while and just kept going and found more and more customers, you have more and more leverage. Because if you go out too early, and raise capital from structured capital, you're giving away the boat because you don't have any leverage, right? Exactly. You need the money. But if you can build your business to a certain milestone, then you can raise money at a better valuation and a better, sometimes you don't even need money. Sometimes you can do it through bank financing or some other ways. I have done it all different ways. I have raised money from structured capital for businesses. I have raised money through alternative financing means, but the best deals I ever did was raising capital from strategic partners. So in other words, when we were in the shaving business, we didn't raise money from necessarily private equity or that type of stuff. We grew because we had partners who had a vested interest. One was a razor manufacturer. One was, a manufacturer of creams and lotions because we needed, so we were able to do it that way and grow. And it was far more beneficial.
Oh, that's great. Like you said, you don't kind of know until you're building your business.
Yeah.
And have you found too, like a lot of the people that are just trying to get that badge of honor, they really don't care about the business they're building, and it's kind of setting it up for failure. I was actually just working with a startup in the healthcare space, and literally the founder just last month was saying like, oh, it's like, for me, it was start a business or get an MBA. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to, like, maybe if it sells in a couple of years, get that health tech exec role. And I'm just here like, what? What are you saying? And it shows like of the initial 5 people that were on the team, 3 are gone now. It's just one of those things where, if you don't actually care about what you're building, it's not going to actually be built.
Oh, it definitely shows. It reflects on you. People that are investing capital, they're looking at the founders and the developers as much as they are looking at the business, because if they don't believe in you and they think that you're just in it for a quick win, then they deal with it in a different way. But if they truly believe that you're there to build a business, then they'll help you a lot better. But anyway, so now you have some other things that you do in addition to Asentio. Let's talk a little bit about that, because some of them are you're an Earth Raider, right? No.
So Earth Hero, it's a great app. So Asentio was in that sustainable AI space, something I'm personally very passionate about, sustainability, climate action. That's something I care about. So I volunteer for this organization called Earth Hero. And what they do is they've built an app that's science-backed. One of the founders is a researcher within the space. And it helps you take specific actions to reduce your personal climate and carbon footprint. By the way, Phil, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback. Are you hearing that?
No? Okay,
it might just be me on my end. Sorry about that. So what's great about Earth Hero is anyone can download it, iOS, Android app. And they've had, if my numbers are correct, almost 60,000 users over the past few years. So they've kind of built this up into a pretty big thing. And I'm kind of helping them now kind of take it to the next level where they're trying to actually turn it into a bit of a business in some way. Not in the traditional sense, but, instead of just catering to individual users, actually cater to businesses and help the employees within the organization or the businesses themselves take these specific climate actions. But in order to do that, I'm kind of helping them through their security audit. So as we mentioned before, I used to work in a security operations center and security is kind of my thing. No matter what role I've always been in, I've always kind of been deep into data privacy, security, and building things up. So I'm kind of helping them out, guiding them along, getting the systems into a place where they can do it. And I personally, it's one of those things where I get so excited just working on it, just because it's truly something that I care about. And because it's something where you can see people taking those actions, leaving the reviews, the feedback, it's that constant gratification as you're working on it too. So if anyone's interested, more the merrier. So please visit earthhero.org, volunteer, download the app, maybe just check it out. I think you'll find it's great if you're really into sustainability, climate action. It would definitely be up your alley.
Are you still getting feedback? If you are, you could pop some headphones in.
Sure thing. Give me one moment.
So it's an app. So it's an app that if I download it and I put it on my phone, what's it telling me to do? Is it analyzing my lifestyle?
Yeah. So it'll kind of guide you through some prompts, help you figure out what actions you're currently taking, what the potential carbon impact of that is, but from a total life cycle perspective. So a lot of times you think, oh, I drove my car. How much gas was released? And that's, the carbon impacts. Like, well, no, you also have a car, and there was a carbon impact of, producing that car as well, and the tires and all of the accessories within it. So one great thing there is they do a total carbon impact of what you're doing. And it kind of gives you actionable steps you can take to reduce it. So it'll prompt you. There's stories. There's a lot of research too. And it's very accessible. So the way they explain it, it's not a scientific paper. They're explaining it as if you would explain it to, your child. But it's still very, very meaty in the information it shares.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. My kids are very much into the whole thing. We get lectures all the time about some of the things that we do, about using plastic bottles and things like that. I mean, we've totally changed some things because of my kids are pushing for it. But yeah, I'll certainly check it out. I read a little bit about it when I saw it on the background, but I wasn't quite clear on what it was doing, because I thought it was. We're involved with a company called iWork, which works in third world countries or in underdeveloped countries like Brazil and Colombia and Vietnam and places like that, because they have a very big issue with trash. And if you're a Johnson and Johnson or Kimberly-Clark and you go into Brazil, for example, and you put, let's say, 2,000 metric tons of plastic into the environment, you have to buy that back. And
Gotcha.
so they're very aggressive with it, and the countries are. And so there's an informal waste sector that goes out and picks up the waste, and they get paid for it. That's actually their jobs. And they go out and they pick up the waste, and then they bring it to these cooperatives, and they get paid for the amount that they bring in. And then the cooperatives sort it, and then this other company comes and takes it and renders it back into its raw form and then sells it. So what iWork does is they've created the marketplace and the training so that if companies like Johnson & Johnson or Kimberly-Clark need to buy back the waste or the waste equivalent, that's what iWork does for them. And they set up the systems inside the cooperatives, making sure that the cooperatives are trained on safety and things like this. And So it's interesting all the different ways that we're trying to attack the problem. So
No, that's great. Have you found that your background in kind of like the consumer product space has helped you specifically for the now this end of life cycle recycling process? I mean, because it is quite detached. You're starting from like the production side. Now you're getting completely to the end here.
oh yeah, it's it's amazing some of the stuff that we've gotten involved in, but it's true. You have to in this day and age. I think you have to look at what's going to happen to our product when we get it into the market. And I'm a big fan of, and I think Amazon has been pushing for less packaging. It
Mhm.
amazes me, eh, you know, a couple of years ago, let's say, right, 5 or 6 years ago, when you bought an iPhone, you had
Mhm.
you had the outer box, and then you had the
Mhm.
inner box, and then you had all these pieces that came along. And now, when you buy one, it's so much more slimmed down and so much easier, and less cardboard, less packaging. And it's the same thing when you look at some of the Amazon products that are coming that are smaller packaging. And to me, I look at some of these brands that we work with that start up, and they start getting involved in this complex packaging. And you say, look, customers are going to get this, and then they're going to start opening it up. What are they going to do with all this packaging? This is going to go in the
Yeah,
trash. This is going to go in the trash. So yeah, it looks great. You're sitting there telling yourself, "Oh boy, look at how beautiful this is." But 5 minutes after they open it, it's all going in the trash. What do you really want them to keep, right? So yeah.
exactly. And I feel like there is a growing consumer sentiment too. Not everywhere, but it's the fact that they don't want to feel wasteful too. And you do feel wasteful when you
Oh,
kind of open up
absolutely.
and have all this extra packaging. So
It drives me crazy.
it's practical too.
It drives me crazy. I bought something the other day. It was a cable, and
Mhm.
the cable came in a brown box, which I can
Mhm.
reuse because the box is actually nice. It's
Nice.
sort of sturdy, and it's small enough, so it's one of those things where you can put things in and keep it. So I thought, man, it was well done because there wasn't any plastic overlay. There wasn't any of this stuff. It was just you opened up the box. There was the cable. It was wrapped with these paper wraps, so it wasn't plastic. And I thought it was well. I thought it was well done, and it was a small company. So
That's great. When a small company can do it well, that's how you know
I
there's no
know
excuse for a big company to not do it too. I mean, come on.
it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Although there's go back to the startup stuff. There's a great quote I saw recently. I can't remember who said it, but they mentioned that if you're starting a business, when they say, "Oh, you're starting a business, but you're going up these big tech giants or these large companies," you're not actually going up against the company. You're going up against a product manager within that company.
Yeah. Right.
And when you frame it that way, it's kind of real nice because no matter where you are, you just think, "I'm not beating the company. I'm beating one person or a team within that company." Really
Yeah.
kind of sets the stage, makes it a little more even.
Yeah. But you're always going after the consumer, so it really doesn't
Mhm.
matter. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. So the whole startup world to me is interesting. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love mentoring them.
Mhm.
I love talking to them. I love the different ways that people think about their business. I do see that there's a segment of younger entrepreneurs that are, uh, I think they have ideas of grandeur. They
Yeah.
think they're going to put together this 10-page PowerPoint, walk into the room, present what their idea is, and walk out with a $10 million check. And has it happened? Sure, it's happened, but it's really happened for people that uh, have really done some things before that or are sort of
Exactly.
known. But I don't. In my lifetime, I don't think it's ever happened with just a guy coming out of school that did it. But anyway,
No, exactly. Yeah, and I think a lot of people like that they don't understand the rigor that comes with starting a business, and that's why people who have done it before, there's more confidence in kind of investing in them.
sure.
Well, another favorite quote, I think I shared you this one. It was starting a business is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. If
Yeah.
you're ready for that, you're ready to start a business. So yeah, you don't. If you've done it before, you've eaten that glass, you've looked down, and you know maybe not had a panic attack, but you've got to come close.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you know, it's tough.
Yeah, there's a point in time, and that's why, going back to the company I was talking about before with the guys who had the app and then they transitioned, and most I think most people would hit that wall saying, okay, this business isn't working, and they would
Mhm.
wrap it up and sort of walk away and go back to their lives and get a job again and always regret it. Whereas these guys just said, well, screw it. We have something else here. We've learned this, so we're just going to turn this into the business. And I think that because I think there's a fear factor of failure, where you hit a wall, you hit a certain point where you're up against an obstacle, and the fear is, hey, I'm not going to make it out of this. So, but I always tell people, look, you're not going to die. What's the worst that happens is that you fail, but you're not going to
Yeah,
die. And chances are you'll be able to get a job. You'll be able to get a job you had before, and you'll be fine. Um,
exactly.
but if you push through, then I think that's part of success.
Absolutely. I think one interesting thing regarding that having founded a company both in the U.S. and now Sweden and Europe in general is I think it's a lot. There's a lot greater reward in the U.S., but there's also a lot more risk,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
because of the fact that in the EU, Sweden specifically, I'll talk about here. There's a lot of social safety nets. So, for example, if you wanted to start a business, if you were working for a company for like 3 years or 5 years, you can take a 6 month sabbatical to try to start a business, and then the company has to come back and rehire you. So, you don't have as much risk there. And then at the same time, healthcare is covered, there's more of those things. So it kind of takes that risk off, and then you can kind of jump in. At the same time, though, I think that's why people that want to start a business in the States tend to be more aggressive and kind of reach those higher heights, because you really got to be hungry. Like, you are risking a lot,
Oh yeah.
a lot more, I'd say, in the sense, because you don't have as much of those safety nets to kind of
Yeah.
fall back on. So that's why I think when you hear about the difference between like starting a business in the States versus elsewhere, those cultural it is significant, kind of the cultural differences in the type of entrepreneur it breeds, then also the willingness to continue or maybe take a step back.
Yeah. It's it is amazing the differences in as you go around the world. But we had a guy, Joe Rothley, who was on the show a couple of times, and
Yeah.
he um are you if you have a dog, or you might be aware of a product called Greenies, which is for dogs' teeth. They chew
Okay.
them.
Is this the one that they chew and it kind of?
Yeah,
Yeah.
helps their
Okay.
teeth in it.
Hmm.
So he started that business in the 1990s, I think 1996, somewhere around there. And he was in his 50s, and he just took the risk. He had no he worked for the government, and he took the risk, and it was really a hockey stick, right? The business was a
Yeah.
hockey stick. It took off. But even with that, there's problems, right? Because you don't have the funding so he's manipulating his credit lines and trying to get it done because he didn't raise any money. But he wound up selling it to Mars for a substantial amount of money back in the mid 2000s. But long story short, he's still um, going strong. He just built a new business called Yummy Combs, which again is for
Okay.
dogs. He also has a tool company called Spider, which is sold in like Lowe's and Home Depot. But he's 80 years old now, and he's still going strong. And I just love the fact that he's still out there doing stuff. So,
That's the thing. Some people, it's in their blood. Like, this gives them life. I think that's the thing. If you will know if you are like set to be founder because you enjoy it, like even through all the BS, you come back, you're like, damn, I want to do that again.
yeah. Listen, we're running up on the towards the end. We've got about 5
Yeah,
minutes. We just got a question in, which I think is a good one, because we
sure.
usually end with some sort of recommendation for somebody. But this one person just said, "What recommendations do you have for someone trying to become a co-founder?" That might be a good question for you to answer right now. Is what recommendations do you have?
Absolutely. So if you're going to be a co-founder, in the name, you're going to be founding the business with other people. And I think the biggest thing there is you have to make sure you truly know the people you're working with,
Yeah.
that you have some experience with them, both good and bad, that you've gone through and worked through, and that you feel like you align in some way. You shouldn't, be the same person. You should have things that you both complement each other on. But the big thing is that you can work together. Prime example, my co-founder for Asentio, Renee, the one that developed the algorithm, we met because we sat next to each other in the same class, and we found that we kept talking about business way more than paying attention to the lectures. And then we worked on projects together in university, and we ran into a ton of issues there too. Team members that were slacking off, and then we pick up the slack. But we realized that we both had the same work ethic. We both cared about the same things, and we had that previous experience. Made it a lot easier to then jump in. I think
Yeah.
if you're going to start a business, do a project with that person beforehand. It doesn't have to be a school project. It's just do something with them. It can be a hackathon. It can be, hey, let's go, start up this volunteer org and try to get some people in our local area to do something. You'll see if you actually have to take an initiative to do something, how that person works in that circumstance, and if they can walk the walk, not just talk it. But then
Yeah.
also if you vibe with them, which is another huge thing.
Yeah. I never bought into that whole idea that you always want to bring on people that are smarter than you and all that. I think you said it before that, you want them to have complementary skills, which I agree with. But I also think you don't want people who are smarter than you, because that really doesn't do anything. You want people who have alignment of vision, but also have
Exactly.
complementary skills. Because if nobody's aligned in the same vision, I don't care how smart you are, it's just going to be a distraction. So, well, we got to wrap it up. We went a little bit too long. We've got about 2.5 minutes left. Any parting words? How can people get in touch with you if they want to, if they have questions for you, things like that?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, first off, thanks for having me. It was a blast just talking about the business background, growing up, hearing some of your stories too. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I believe you have my LinkedIn in the show notes. I'll also leave my email too. Feel free to reach out, my personal email as well, so make it easier. And happy to talk to anyone, give you advice. If you also just want to talk through your idea, give you feedback. Love meeting with people, especially people passionate about what they're building. So always open for a chat.
Yeah, great. Hey, thanks for coming on. And I got a couple of closing things to do, but thanks for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time to talk tonight.
Likewise, Phil. I'll speak soon.
All right, I'll see you. Yeah, excellent conversation. I think we touched on a lot of things. It's true. When you're starting out, we had this discussion about co-founders. Somebody asked the question about co-founders, and it's true. You want to make sure that you're compatible with that person, because you're going to be doing things. You don't want to be fighting and arguing all the time. And if you have alignment of vision on where you want to get to, and you have complementary skills, then you're all working together to try and get to where you want to be. So that was a great question, and I'm glad that we brought that up. So I think what Zach's doing today is great. We've talked about AI on this show a lot, and just a different perspective on what we're doing with AI, and how you can use it to really make things better. I apologize for cutting this short, but we went a little bit over on the discussion, but I think the discussion was worth it. And again, tune in every week. We always have great entrepreneurs on, and if you miss a show, that's okay. You can go back and look at it on E360 TV. The content is there. It's also on my YouTube channel, and so we try and have great conversations, a good mix of types of entrepreneurs, whether it's consumer products or technology. We don't really want to focus on any one thing, but I really appreciate you guys coming on and or watching tonight, and tune in next week. Have a good night.